just likes
Magic of-
hanging with us.
I do. So we're live now.
Thank you. There's still 1 minute though. It's nice that they can see us and. Yeah. Lovely, Richard. I can do the welcome card. Or I can- Welcome all to the reconvening of the hearing on the Flood Protection Management Bylaw 2022. We're going to do a procedural matter first, which is the late submissions. We received 2 submissions late by agreement, and so we've done that by minute already. There were 3 other submissions by Lee Griffiths, Colin Brown and Ian Bryant, 2 of which we've already heard. So we, in respect, have already we've heard them, but we need to just agree that we are going to receive them, and so we'll do that. We're happy to move.
Yep, moved.
Seconded.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thanks. Carried. Thank you. That takes us to the substantive matters of the day. Thank you, staff. You've been busy considering all of the submissions further after the speaking to them, and now's your chance to give a reply to those submissions and any changed or varied recommendations. So I'll leave it to you, Josie or Alison. Josie, thank you.
Thank you. So we've prepared a written response to the panel requests and intend to just read through that for the benefit of everyone, intending to read through them kind of point by point so that any questions that arise from those points can be discussed.
So do you want to take topic by topic rather than the whole document?
If you're happy.
Yep, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
A public hearing in respect of the Otago Regional Council proposed flood protection management proposed bylaw was held in the ORC Council Chamber, Philip Lang House, Dunedin on Friday, 13th of May 2022. The hearing panel comprised Councillor Kate Wilson, Chair, Councillor Gretchen Robertson and Mr. Alan Cubitt, Independent Commissioner. The hearing panel has requested clarification or advice on various matters. These have been addressed below under the following titles: Submission 9, University of Otago; Submissions 14, 16 and 19, Emma Peters, Sweden Consultancy Limited, Charlotte Young and Jason Coops; Submission 23, IH and DJ Bryant, and other matters. This report is an addendum to the summary of submissions report dated 9th of May 2022, an amended Appendix 2, proposed flood protection management bylaw, is attached to this report. So we'll start with submission 9 from the University of Otago. The hearing panel has requested the following information to address points raised by the University of Otago submission: provision for minor earthworks associated with repair, replacement of services, e.g. cables and pipes; provision for gardening within 20 metres of a defence against water; accuracy of Leith-Lindsay defence against water mapping and any implications of this; and confirmation of measurement of 7 metres and 20 metres from the Leith-Lindsay defence against water. Regarding the provision for minor earthworks within 20 metres of a defence against water. Rule 3.2I restricts earthworks in, on, through, under, within 20 metres of a defence against water, unless those earthworks relate to cultivation, between the bank of a river and the defence against water, and within any excavation sensitive area. The University of Otago advised that they undertake minor service works, e.g. placement, replacement or maintenance of cables and pipes around 10 to 20 times a year. Earthworks can present a major risk to flood protection works as they can alter the land surface and change flow patterns, both during and after the completion of earthworks activities. And it is important that there is appropriate consideration of risk and mitigation measures, even for what may appear to be relatively minor earthworks. As such, we consider that it is appropriate that the University of Otago obtain bylaw authority for the types of works described, particularly given their relative frequency. We consider this bylaw authority could be in the form of a global bylaw authority, which references a works program required to be approved by ORC prior to works being undertaken. This would allow for flexibility, as a works program could be periodically updated rather than the University of Otago having to apply for new bylaw authorities each time.
Any questions on that?
So I'm reading that as similar to a management plan, condition and a resource consent, the works program. So you can
Yes.
change that. You don't have to go back to change the consent.
Yes, you can have a works program which is updated and then signed off by the relevant council staff.
Yeah.
So that they could add in, for example, works between X and X. And this is how they'll mitigate any risk. And then that can be signed off rather than having to apply for a fresh bylaw each time.
Yeah.
I think we dealt with it under this section, so I'm apologies if it wasn't. Emergency works, because they have one of the largest leads that may require emergency works, along with DCC, I suppose, in that area. Would that cover emergencies, or is that dealt with in a different section? I'm sorry, I haven't read the whole document.
It's not elsewhere in the document.
We did raise
My
emergencies.
thoughts are that
Yeah.
I'll check with others that emergency works could be covered under that. Do you have?
Yes, I think we could cover that. We would set out some protocols around notification and that kind of thing. So I think it could cover planned and unplanned works.
Great. Thanks.
You
You get a retrospective bylaw approval for, in terms of that emergency. You can under the RMA. Does that apply under a bylaw authority?
There's not provision for it in the bylaw. As a matter of practice, we have granted retrospective bylaws for people, not normally emergency situations.
Yeah, you could imagine if in the middle of the night some
You just
like
got
work
to
needed done or
do
whatever.
what you got to do, don't you?
Yeah,
It's more likely probably for DCC, to be fair.
Yeah. Yeah, or us.
Or another TA in Alex, perhaps.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You're covered because of the
Yes.
council's covered, the DCC council would not be. And in the past, have they done emergency works that, what's happening?
It's not something that I've seen. It's not something I've heard about, and we did have quite a discussion about our ability, ORC's ability to do emergency works in the last year, about a year ago. So I haven't got any anecdotal evidence of it happening. I think a lot of the time it comes to us doing that work for real emergencies, but I don't have an answer.
And it would be case by case, which makes it really, I mean, you think of a breach in sewage, it might be going into the league, you certainly wouldn't want to be.
Making around.
Just get it done. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. Greater good, thank you.
are you happy for me to continue?
Yes, thank you, that's great. So we're now to 1.9.1.
Okay, provision for gardening within 20 metres of a defence against water. Rule 3.2I restricts earthworks in, on, through, under, within 20 metres of a defence against water, between the bank of a river and the defence against water, and within any excavation sensitive area. Rule 3.2I2 restricts earthworks within 20 metres of a defence against water unless those earthworks relate to cultivation. Cultivation is defined in the proposed bylaw as cultivation means the alteration or disturbance of land or any matter constituting land, including soil, clay, sand, and rock, for the purpose of sowing, growing, or harvesting of pasture or crops to a depth of no more than 300 millimetres below the existing ground surface. It is considered that cultivation is allowable within 20 metres of a defence against water because of its nature, minor land disturbance and planting of small crops. It is not likely to adversely affect the integrity or operation of the flood protection works. We consider that cultivation can also be extended to include planting associated with gardening, which is comparable to crops and includes grasses, ground cover, bulbs, and small flowering plants, but which excludes large plants such as shrubs, hedges, or trees. As such, we propose that the definition of cultivation is amended as shown below to allow for small-scale gardening activities within 20 metres of a defence against water. Cultivation means the alteration or disturbance of land or any matter constituting land, including soil, clay, sand, and rock, to a depth of no more than 300 millimetres below the existing ground surface for the purpose of sowing, growing, or harvesting of pasture, crops, or domestic gardening. Cultivation does not include the planting of trees, shrubs, or hedges.
So does domestic gardening include commercial or institution such as the university?
Domestic gardening term was used to exclude commercial such as market gardening.
As long as we understand that that applies to the university maintaining their landscaping.
Landscaping. Oh, how would you?
So you wouldn't want market gardening in Bryant's, which is another similar case?
No.
Because it's more intensive?
Well, we might allow it. All we're saying is it goes through an approval and consideration process, and it may very well get an authority to do it under certain conditions. It's not a prohibition.
Okay, no, thank you.
So also for large scale gardening that isn't domestic, like say the university, which is quite extensive potentially, that could be part of their work program they put through their bylaw as well. It might be appropriate potentially that it doesn't meet the definition of domestic.
And and if they wanted to do things that may turn into be trees, shrubs, or hedges, they'd have to get that authority.
With a memorial garden was an example of that, where they occasionally plant a tree. They could do that through their
Work program.
So chances are we might have 5 of these in a 5-year period, and you get approval on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
The accuracy of the Leith-Lindsay Defence Against Water mapping and any implications of this. A question was raised regarding the accuracy of the Leith-Lindsay maps showing defences against water adjacent to the Leith Channel through buildings, etc., and not down the middle of the riverbed. We clarify that the Leith-Lindsay Defence Against Water is the concrete lined bed and concrete walls of the river and or earth bunds adjacent to the river, and is not the line shown on the map. We propose to amend the location of the Leith-Lindsay Defence Against Water lines in the second schedule by showing it in the location identified above. We also consider the definition of defence against water could be amended to say, defence against water means any defence against water shown in the second schedule. The beds of the water of Leith and Lindsay Creek and associated flood protection structures are defences against water. The locations of the water of Leith and Lindsay Creek are marked in blue in the second schedule.
So that will then show the area that Mr. Woods showed in his first, as an example. It will show those those 2 lines.
Yes.
And then the 7 and the 20 come after that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
The map will show 1 line down the middle, but the clarification shows that confirms what has always been the case, that the 7 metres or the 20 metres runs from the bank, whether the bank's the concrete wall or the earth bund.
So in every other map, just gain consistency, every other map we've shown the line of the river or the bed.
The Leith and Lindsay defences against water are the only areas where the whole bed is considered to be, well, is defined as that. So the other maps, the line runs along the flood bank or along the scheduled drain.
It's just 1 line.
1 line.
Okay, so that it's a similar thing. Okay, but the others are in the bed of the. I'll come back to that. I think that's part of that other discussion I had on the definitions.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions on that?
Nope.
You're all fair on that? Thank you.
Confirmation of measurement of 7 metres and 20 metres from the Leith-Lindsay Defence Against Water. Rules 3.2 C, D, E, F, G and I restrict activities within either 7 metres or 20 metres of the landward side of the Defence Against Water. There was some confusion relating to from where the distances from the Leith-Lindsay Defence Against Water should be measured. The relevant statement of the rules is copied below. within 7 metres of the landward side of any defence against water, within 20 metres of the landward side of any defence against water. In our view, this rule applies to the distance measured from the landward edge of the defence against water. In the Leith Lindsay, this is considered to be from the outer edge of the top of the concrete wall or the landward toe of the earth bund. We also note that the Leith Lindsay map legend incorrectly refers to the defence against water as a flood bank and propose that this is amended to Leith Lindsay defence against water.
Any questions?
No.
Is it hard to define where that landward toe of the earth bund is when you see it on the ground? Should be pretty clear.
Yes, there's only one bund downstream of Clyde Street on the true right bank, and it's clearly a trapezoidal object with a very definitive toe.
So there'd be no doubt about that.
Right, and we're only talking about defences of water in the Leith Lindsay that are a concrete wall or a landward toe of an earth bund. There's nothing else.
My understanding is that in the Leith Lindsay catchment, they're the types of flood protection works.
There are weirs in the bed of the water of Leith,
Yeah.
but for the purposes of measurement,
Bed,
it's
yeah.
appropriate to measure from the wall of the bund, as the case may be.
Always an earth bund.
Yeah.
There's always an earth bund. Yeah. Okay, cool.
I may come back to that just to make sure that we are with the picture, that we are absolutely clear on that, so that, and then the question is, does it need the clarity of a picture in the appendices? And it may already be there, but I just think we need to be really clear, considering the confusion that we may have by the very questions we asked. Mr. Woods confused ourselves. Thank you. I don't know that it does need a picture, but just for the consistency, and then it saves doubt and everyone knows. Okay, thank you. On to submissions 14, 16 and 19. I think there may have been some others on a similar line, but these are the ones that we heard from.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
The hearing panel has requested the following information to address points raised in the titled 3 submissions. Appropriate time for objections to be made, and if the objection made within this time must contain all objection material, and filling restrictions between 7 metres and 20 metres for defence against water. Relating to appropriate time for objections to be made, and if the objection made within this time must contain all objection material. The submitters stated that 15 working days was not long enough to prepare an objection, Rule 5.3a, given that it may require technical and expert inputs. A question was also raised whether it was expected that all information in relation to the objection is included within the stated timeframe. The Local Government Act 2002 does not require an objections process or define any time period associated with an objection. But to provide more time, it could be extended out to 20 working days, which is consistent with the Resource Management Act 1991. Clause 5.3b2 states that matters that the council must have regard to when making its determination, including the matters presented in support of the objection. As such, we consider that all information being presented in the objection should be provided within the stated timeframe. We note that there is nothing restricting a person requesting an extension to the objection period. For consistency, we consider that the period for making a written submission on the revocation of an authority also be extended to 20 working days, Rule 6.1b22.
So are you saying in 5.3a that we need to say, I'm just, your first 2 points really. Any person who applies for authority under this bylaw within 20 working days of receiving any decision may object in writing to the council in regard to the decision or authority. Objections to it, do we need to put in there that they must state the reasons, or is that and give the evidence? Is that what you're wanting us to do within that time or not? So I think we just need to, I'm not going to put the words in there now, but I think that's what you're saying, is that somewhere in there we need to say that with reasons. It's not just the objections, but the grounds for the objection is what you're.
Yes,
Okay, yeah.
yes, the grounds for the objection
And
should be within the objection
Yeah.
provided within that 20 working days.
Yeah. So maybe grounds and evidence. I don't know. Well, the hearing would give the evidence, but there has to be, the grounds has to be, the evidence presented has to be tied to the grounds that they present in the objection. It can't just be a hearing that's all over the place, I presume.
May not even be a hearing or readings.
No, there's not a,
Oh, there's not a formal hearing.
no, there's not.
So I'm getting confused that we do have an objections hearings committee, or we used to. Sorry,
I probably confused this because I was
Yes.
confusing this with the appeal process.
you were.
And the
It's all
RMA,
your
where you can
fault.
just lodge an appeal and you don't have to give all your evidence.
Yeah, no, but we'll come back to that one. Thank you. That's submission. Thank you.
Are you happy for me to carry on?
Did you have any more questions?
No, that's all good, thanks.
Thank you.
Filling restrictions between 7 metres and 20 metres from a defence against water. Submissions 14, 16 and 19 raised the matter that under the 2012 bylaw, filling is allowed between 7 and 20 metres from a defence against water, but that the proposed bylaw amendment has removed this allowance. We note that the proposed change from the use of the term excavation to earthworks in Rule 3.2I results in any filling activities within 20 metres of the landward side of the defence against water requiring an authority. The submissions highlighted that this would cause them operational issues on their farm. We have discussed the risks of undertaking excavation and fill works within 7 and 20 metres from a defence against water with council staff. We have been advised that excavation earthworks need to be restricted up to 20 metres from a defence against water because they contribute to increased risk of piping, erosion and flood bank failure. Earthworks involving fill, however, need only be restricted to within 7 metres from a defence against water for the operation or integrity of flood protection works. As such, we propose that the term filling be deleted from the definition of earthworks to allow for fill earthworks more than 7 metres from a defence against water. The proposed earthworks definition saying, earthworks means the alteration or disturbance of land, including by moving, removing, placing, blading, cutting, contouring, or excavation of earth, or any matter constituting the land, including soil, clay, sand, and rock. We acknowledge that this also impacts rules 3.3 floodways and 3.4 groins, crossbanks, and training lines, and are comfortable that this is appropriate with respect to those flood protection works.
So they'll be consequential. Because we didn't get, consequential amendments. Thank you. Any
So if
questions?
you agree with that change, there won't be any consequential amendments required to those rules. It's
it
just
will
that they
affect them.
use that same definition of earthworks.
Thank
So
you.
we have considered that
Right.
how the change affects all works.
Thank
So
you.
just for clarification, the engineering staff weren't worried about filling on a floodway or filling between the, I can't remember, it's the bank and the training lines or something on the other ones.
They can't,
Yeah, I mean, a primary issue or is the 7 metre is for access. And so the desire is to keep that area, to keep fill out of that area. 20 metres is about erosion. It is still of concern, but the concern is seen as less. There's also a consistency thing that the bylaw allows people to dump or deposit between 7 metres and 20 metres. So it would be unreasonable to then allow fill.
so this, you still can't do fill at 7 metres, but from 7 to 20 you can.
That's correct. So it remains the same as it was under the previous version of the bylaw.
Thank you. More questions at Mr. Hubert?
Well, I'm just trying to work out, there's a difference between what a floodway is and what a distance from the edge of something 20 metres out. As long as you guys are happy with that, floodways.
We may test it, we may test it
Yeah.
in the definitions when we go through the, just checking that stuff, because that is that, and our minds
Yeah.
may just change that. Yeah.
Sometimes it's easier just to actually make a change for that particular rule so you don't mess with the other ones and get unintended consequences.
I'm hoping that they've got that, but we
Yeah.
might just test it when we flick through after the submission process. Yeah. Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Bryant.
Okay, IH and DJ Bryant's submission raised that their property has been identified as an excavation area, but noted that various reports stated that there is minimal risk to flood banks from excavation on their property. We have sought advice from Tonkin and Taylor and concluded that it is appropriate for the excavation sensitive area on IH and DJ Bryant's property to be reduced. A map showing the extent to be deleted is attached to this addendum. And you have you have the maps.
That's going to be a sharp line down the road, whatever that road's called, and then a nice parallel to the red line, and then back up to the road on a fence boundary. So
It's just across the Bryant property.
yeah, well, it's limited in scope because of that,
Yes.
I presume. Did you reference the Golder report?
No.
What did you talk about? No.
Oh, well, sorry. Tonkin and Taylor did refer to the Golder report in their comments.
Okay, so his house is such that it still affects his house.
I don't know because we haven't actually measured it.
Oh, it's his house is in the picture.
Okay.
So that's it. That is his house there. I think he referred to. I think it's his driveway.
Yeah.
You may have been there, but yeah. No, it is. His house is still on the boundary. There's a white. Yeah. So he'll be able to garden now. I mean, you've alleviated some of those issues. He can garden. His house, he won't be able to do extensions without an authority.
That's great.
Is he limited in his gardening at the back of a section in the excavation sensitive area? He may, as Mr.
So all the
Just be happy with it.
all the 3.2 rules for defences against water and excavation sensitive areas would apply. So that would mean planting of trees, plants, shrubs or hedges, or constructing structures or removing or altering structures, or the dumping and depositing, and of course the earthworks would all apply to that area still.
But he could do fill. Now, the consequential changes of the last one is he can now fill it. And if he fills it, can he put trees on those fill? Because it's not, it's going to be particularly, I'm just going to test things now.
So the earthworks are still excluded at 20 metres.
Oh, it's limited to 20.
But
Even if it's in that
oh,
zone.
sorry, yeah, earthworks require bylaw approval within the excavation sensitive area.
Yeah.
So, and within the excavation sensitive area, he would also need bylaw approval to plant a tree.
If he's got existing garden,
Sorry, no, he wouldn't. Sorry, excuse me. That's just a defence against water. For the excavation sensitive area, he could plant trees, shrubs and hedges as long as they're more than 7 metres from the landward side of the bank.
so as long as he takes his garden, he can have a garden or curtilage around his house, but he can't, or she can't, go within 20 metres of the, to 7 metres of the bank.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's clear.
The only earthworks restricted within the excavation sensitive area is excavation. It is not filling.
All gardening,
Yeah.
But cultivation's allowed. I need to check that.
Elevations.
Thank you, Josie.
Right.
Any other questions from other matters? Other matters is other submissions, I think, or things that were raised. Like the next one, I shouldn't have said willows were a pest tree, and I'm sorry. You know, that's not a necessary true statement, but sycamores are, I think, designated pest tree, and that was they were both given as examples by the Northeast Valley group.
Right. Okay, so removal of pest tree plants, for example, willows and sycamores, acknowledging your statement. Councillor Wilson requested clarification on whether the removal of pest tree plants such as willows and sycamores should be enabled. The removal of trees presents a significant risk to defences against water by changing flow paths and or resulting in holes susceptible to erosion and scour. This risk remains regardless of whether they are native species or pest plant species such as willows and sycamores. The requirement to obtain a bylaw authority means that appropriate consideration of the risk occurs, and for this reason we consider it appropriate to include the pest plants in this clause. If landowners are looking to remove pest plant species from their properties, it is likely ORC staff would work with the landowner with respect to their removal and any bylaw authority. We note that the proposed bylaw states council may waive the whole or any part of a fee payable under this bylaw, and this could be a situation where a waiver may apply. This would be considered on a case-by-case basis.
So Love with the Leaf, for example, or BUE, the group that submitted, could essentially also do a global consent like the university with the consent of the landowners and do it all together as a work program if there was a community group.
Yes.
Which might make the process easier for everyone, but equally individually they could go and apply for waivers for doing that sort of work as well. I mean, individual households could do that work, but they would, yeah. How would they know that they need to do it? I'm worried about that education side, given the lack of clarity. Well, yeah, how do we tell people that this is best practice? And this is actually what you have to do, otherwise you're, because this is going to be in quite a substantial amount of garden area.
It is an element of the bylaw that people aren't always aware of it, and that is something we need to work on, is getting more information available. One element of that is making the website a bit more clear. It occasionally ties in with the designations, particularly in the DCC area, that people become aware of it because they go to the DCC about something, and the designation and the bylaws tend to run along the same lines. But that wouldn't be the case for a tree removal. So yeah, we need to get more information out there.
Something we can note, isn't it, as well, in terms of awareness about the wider bylaw. Yep.
Yeah, I certainly don't think I'd be going to the website to see. No, I probably want a letter drop or something, but I don't want to fix that problem here either. It's but knowing it's fine to put it in. This has to be the most efficient way of doing something. That's one of the challenges with the bylaw, I think. And I totally get the defence systems being protected, but it's also the unintended consequences of making people have enforcement action against them, or something if they, and just understanding how that process. So I presume we don't normally go in with to make examples of people that wouldn't be the way we'd do it.
No, that's that same philosophy I think happens in the RM sphere, is that education and discussion as well. And that's our operations team are really good communicating with people who are out there in the area talking about it, but probably it isn't as much in the knowledge when it comes to the urban areas. So, but,
We're certainly working with BUE and the Northeast and Lovely the Leith groups pretty well connected. I think it'd be a real opportunity.
that'd be a good way to
That is slightly off piece now, sorry, but thank you. Permitted planting guidance.
The proposed bylaw places restrictions on planting any tree, shrub, hedge, or part thereof within 7 metres of a scheduled drain, defence against water, groin, crossbank, or training line, or in a floodway, or within flood protection vegetation. Smaller plants that are not trees, shrubs, or hedges, for example, grasses, ground cover, bulbs, and small flowering plants, can be planted without requiring a bylaw authority. Please see paragraphs 12 to 15, which recommend authorising planting associated with gardening. Councillor Wilson requested more information on whether ORC can provide some guidance to assist people wishing to undertake riparian planting works that don't require bylaw authority. There are riparian planting guides available on the ORC website. A link to that site is included. However, we acknowledge that there are not many plants in these lists that can be planted without a bylaw authority. The interactions between planting and flood effects are complex, and there are risks that inappropriate planting can adversely affect the integrity and operation of flood protection works. For example, restricting flow capacity or diverting flows, resulting in changed flow direction and increased erosion and scour. The risks of planting adversely affecting flood protection works are site-specific. We have consulted with council staff and consider the best approach is for individual groups to approach ORC staff for site-specific guidance on plantings that would be appropriate from a flood management perspective, rather than to provide blanket recommendations which could present a risk to flood management works in some locations. We suggest a statement inviting people to discuss could be added to the website.
Any questions?
No, I've got that.
No.
So in some ways, you're retracting your response to the submitters to look at that guideline.
Well, we've spoken with natural hazards and identified the risk of doing.
Because at the moment,
So-
the response does send them to that page. So you're retracting the advice to send them to that riparian planting page.
The riparian planting page is still applicable. We just acknowledge that there are not very many plants
Okay.
that can be planted without bylaw authority. So that it does refer to a few grass species that could be planted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Carrots is, okay. Thank you, etc. Thank you. Use of the term authorised in Rule 3.
Councillor Wilson raised the matter that the statement,
Yeah.
in Rule 3.0 uses the word authorised, and that it was unclear if this meant the same as the term authority as defined in the proposed bylaw. Authority means written approval issued by the council under this bylaw, or instead meant permitted, allowed, approved. In our view, the term authorised means permitted, allowed, approved, rather than requiring authority as defined in the proposed bylaw. We consider this could be clarified by amending the wording to say, nothing in this bylaw applies to council employees or persons contracted by council undertaking maintenance or emergency works on flood protection works.
Thank you. Very well done. Now, I think we've all spent some time considering anything else. Are you happy to take on the fly any other questions we may have? In which case, and again, we can do this in stages because I think that we may have some very specific ones. But the first question then becomes scope. So if we can tie it to a submission, that's fine, we've got scope. Is there an issue if they're just typo or consistency ones? Is there scope for us or you to change them or advise us to change them?
Minor amendment
Minor
should be
amendment, yeah,
fine.
yeah.
But,
That would be my
wording.
expectation.
Okay, so not having been a good girl and read clearly all through my definitions at the start of this, which may have helped you, and on the same line as that last one is the word council and definition. Now I'm listening. Oh, sorry, I should go first to the purpose. Let's start at the beginning. Oh, no, oh, yeah. Do you want to go through the submissions line by line and then do the whole review of this, which is easiest for you guys?
I think either's fine.
Yeah.
Someone else take the lead on this. Which way would you?
Oh,
maybe
so
easiest-
now we're going to go into the full deliberation process,
yeah,
Kate, or are you
yeah.
going to ask the staff
Yeah,
for
that's the
a
issue.
list of questions? Because I'm thinking, in my head, I thought we were going to perhaps go through your list of questions, so they've got a heads up on what they
Yeah.
sort of look like.
Yeah.
And then if there's any that are substantive, we could adjourn and give them a little bit
Yeah.
of time to think
Yeah.
about them, or
And we can start. Yeah.
but if they're all sort of just quite quick, we could maybe
Yeah.
able to get through them. But if you read them
Yeah.
all out and then
Yeah.
we'll
Well, maybe
get an
once-
idea,
yeah.
because we haven't heard them either.
Yeah, I'm sure there's others may have some more, but they are pedantry ones, but this make for a better reading, I think. So if we start, and if we don't do this now, it means that deliberations become much more complicated. So
Yeah,
thank you,
yeah.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So in the purpose one, you've got words in there in italics that I'm not quite, almost a definition. They're not quite exactly the definition because they've got the word can in there. And I'm not quite sure that they actually relate to the purpose. Why are those words there?
And I think Mr. Hornbrook raised it.
He did he? I haven't had a chance to cross
I have a
reference.
feeling he raised that issue about having a definition and the purpose. Well, his submission was wider than that. It didn't have a purpose at all. But I think the definition possibly doesn't need to be.
Yeah, and it's slightly inconsistent with the word can instead of the definition itself doesn't have the word can. So
So in relation to Mr. Hornbrook's submission, we sought legal advice, and that advice said that it was that description is fine to be left in because it provides context.
The summary of submissions on Oliver Hornbrook say that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay, so okay, but it's just the word can. Should that be in there?
I had no problem with the purpose being stated, but I just wondered why you needed a definition and the purpose when you've already got a definition in the next section. And if they're slightly different than what Kate's saying, and they are you best just to avoid that and just delete that?
Well, you can come back. You may be able to put it on. It's just whether it's actually adding to the matter.
I see what you're asking about can though
Yes,
as well.
because
Kate, does it add anything? Or do they actually mean includes and then that, etc. really?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's what the actual definition is. I've got my pages so muddled up now.
Yeah, that's all Mr. Hornbrook is.
Well, if you want to answer that now, I'll just think about it and include it on his.
Yeah, it'd be good to think about that one.
Yeah. Okay, definitions as we go through. Bed, thank you very much. That's been clarified because of the word in the defence against water means, and it includes the word bed, so that's resolved itself. Council. Now, this again is the use of the word authorised means that you're a council, and I don't know that you want people who are authorised under here to pretend to be the council, because that's actually what you're.
This is in the definition.
Just read the definition.
Yeah.
Council means the Otago Regional Council and includes any person duly authorised by the council to exercise any of the powers conferred upon the council by this bylaw. And so that's the contract as you do, but if you're authorised to do something under this bylaw, as you know, if you're authorising farmlands to do something on their beside their drain, you don't want them to say that then the council can do what.
Although I don't know that there'd be a person, well, powers conferred upon council, it will be powers they receive by receiving a bylaw authority.
So when you go through the act and see where you're using the word council, you're saying the council can issue the bylaws, authorities.
I thought
That person then can't be that person.
I thought that was possibly referring to delegated authority. So Gavin having delegated authority by the council. Because that's the only way I could see you would need something like that in as opposed to what you've already got under 3.
Council
Which is
just means the
changed,
Otago
yeah.
Regional Council, doesn't it?
Should do.
Yeah, rather than someone who holds the bylaw authorisation.
It's not a change though. In the you haven't changed this one. It's again that word authorised instead of delegated or contracted. Because this is a bylaw that gives an authorisation using it's exactly the same as we were going to go with 3 and you've talked about contracted.
So maybe that's one that we can check the wording.
Authorised.
Changing the wording of authorised and probably seek legal advice to make sure that it doesn't have any unintended.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
consequence.
Sorry for raising it so late. I don't think it's the one that Mr. Hornbrook.
Has it been read?
No.
We can get
Probably fine, and that it refers to our powers to, I don't know, do bylaws essentially, but rather than the actions you would have if you held a bylaw authorisation. But yeah, just checking it would be okay. Yep.
So cultivation is going to be changed slightly through submissions.
No, so that was the removal.
Fence above the drain. Now, when the definition of bed, when I reread it, makes it really clear it's bank to bank. The drain is described instead in the appendices, and that's not referenced.
So it's a scheduled drain, isn't it, that we're,
No, drain, the definition of drain in clause 3.3 floodways. So the definition of drain, and so I understand when I look at a bed, riverbed, it's really clear in my head bank to bank. We don't say that about a drain. So, but that's what you intend. And you then, oh no, it's scheduled drain, it's not drain. And the appendix, sorry.
Drain seems to, well, only in the context of Word 3.3, isn't it?
said it's
The floodway. Yeah.
What does that drain look like? I'm trying to get water pictures like my, yeah.
in a floodway,
Yeah.
a drain in 3.3 G. So that's not one of our, that's not a council owned or controlled drain. That's actually saying that private people with drains in the floodways, which are in the Waitaki area, can undertake some work on them. So probably the definition of what the drain is isn't quite as important, because it's not, it's a carve out or an exclusion.
It's quite specific.
Like,
Yeah.
no person shall, without prior authority of the council, carry out any earthworks in any floodway, excluding maintenance of drains. It's a double negative. Okay. So, okay, it's not so important to understand what it's saying. So, okay, so scheduled drain, that, okay, that's it, that's that consistency thing. Okay, thank you, sorry. So then we get down to,
Oh, we've got earthworks and the removal of filling.
that's going to change.
Yes,
Filling
how is that? So in a floodway, so how does it, what does a floodway look like? Do you actually want people to be able to fill in those floodways?
So the floodway,
Floodways are rule 3.3, and there's no dumping or depositing. So filling will be captured by point E. No
Okay.
person shall dump or deposit
Yeah.
anything.
So, yeah, so that how's that, that's how it catches it. Yeah, so yeah, okay, got it. I think, is that the same as the other one, the training banks, training lines? Yes, okay, that's how you capture that. Okay, got that. That's the easiest way to do that. Well,
Okay. And groin, I just, consistency, most, yeah, there's a real inconsistency between plurals and singulars. Yeah, you may want to look at that later.
Yeah.
Planting is gone. River.
is it the RMA definition?
Of scheduled drain or
River, yeah. I think that was mentioned, wasn't it? Whether it is.
bed, I
Yeah.
think we were concerned about, but yeah.
Yeah.
River is the definition.
Out
I know
of the
there's-
RMA.
there's
Yeah.
an So I thought there's an exclusion for artificial water courses.
Yes, so the RMA definition, sorry, does have the exclusion on the end, but does not include any artificial watercourse, including an irrigation canal, water supply race, canal for the supply of water for electricity power generation, and farm drainage canal.
So you've excluded the farm drainage canal when you've done the exclusion.
So we have defined what a river is and what a drain is.
Oh, so that's the reason you've got to split them in two.
Yeah.
But you haven't got the farm drainage in the drain. You've got, but excludes artificial watercourses used for conveyance of water for electricity generation, irrigation, or water supply purposes. But your definition you just gave had more in there. So it leaves just that anomaly, where does it sit?
So that second part of the river definition in the RMA is it's in brackets describing an artificial watercourse.
Okay,
So it's just stating like a farm drainage canal could be an artificial watercourse.
you've got the other ones in there though, haven't you? You've stuck and copied and pasted the other bits, but not the one. It just leaves it.
So our definition is just rivers mean a continually or intermittently flowing body of fresh water.
So the definition in the RMA is exactly that, except for then has an exclusion, which has been picked up word for word, I think, in the drain description, except for the farm.
Yes,
Yeah.
so the rivers has used the front part of the RMA definition,
Yeah.
but not defined what a river is not.
Yeah,
The definition of drain has come from the National Planning Standards definition.
okay. Thank you. Which is good. Okay. Where that's all going to go. Thank you. And I think even if it were farm drain in those areas, it's going to be covered by that exclusion to clean it and maintain it.
Yeah.
If it's private one. Okay, next we go to any other ones under definitions you have found here that concern you. Sorry, owner. Rent. Why not rent? What is rent? And I should know.
Yeah. It's market rent basically, but it is a very old-fashioned term to use.
But even if you receive rent, doesn't make you the occupier? I mean the owner?
Yeah, I'm guessing it's getting at the idea that you need to be that it
You need to get a benefit.
you're getting it's not say a life interest type of arrangement, although it should cover that actually because it is trying to be quite an open definition.
I presume it would stop Maori land actually, which often isn't occupied. I mean, that's not often, it may stop that sort of stuff, the owner being caught up in that. You know, or one of those confusing trust situations.
Yeah.
I can understand that, but rent would still apply. Market rent would certainly be a nicer term. So
Yeah.
don't worry.
So why is it defined like that? Is it because some of this area doesn't have titles?
But that rent, I wouldn't know.
I don't-
Like crown land.
Be the
There is,
leasing
yeah,
and
that's
then
true.
subleasing
The Crown land, that's a
and
good
on
point. I don't
like-
know. I've looked at some of the other bylaws around the country and they just this morning and they say something similar, not all of them, but maybe 2 or 3 other ones use the same language. And I'm checking what
with an area where there's quite often no title.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you can rent it if there's no title.
I was wondering about subleasing too, that you are renting it out essentially, but you're not the owner, so.
it's a that's a good point. So I have sent a query through for legal
It's just such an
advice on
archaic
it.
term and
It is very old.
it makes the rest of it. Yeah, it's
It's
fine.
along the statute of 1300.
You would know.
Well, I read them at night to go to sleep.
Sorry, yeah, I obviously couldn't sleep. Okay, we've done all of the other ones. Structures, I'm absolutely fine with that. I don't want to complicate it, but I did have a question about bailage. Bailage being left in paddocks, which tends to, they are structure, I mean, I don't know. It just occurred to me that those, or maybe it's in the next page actually that comes up.
The
Construct or
bailage
put any structure in or over
content
through, yeah.
deposit, isn't it?
Is-
That's how
I
you
would
pick
think
that up.
so, yeah,
Hmm?
a structure is fixed.
With the dump and deposit thing you
Well-
pick up there.
The problem with bailage in the flood area is, and I think that's happened in the last flood on the Taieri, it just picked them up and moved them and they didn't obstruct. And that, I just want,
It includes any raft and a bailage
Yeah, well-
becomes a raft pretty quickly, yeah.
I don't know, why I just left it there for clarity. I'm asking difficult questions.
I think the dump or deposit, as Josie said, does pick
Yeah,
that,
those
and
will-
yeah.
Alan says does
Control.
pick it up.
Yeah.
So it's not a structure,
You're
but
not,
it's
no, you're not,
control.
sorry, you're not putting, they didn't dump it, they're putting it in a flood area,
Deposited it.
but not in the scheduled drain. Oh, it's in the flow path. So,
Depends where it is.
no, the thing is, the problem is that if you get a flood coming into that ponding area, it moves them into it. It's God's floodwaters do it. They haven't done it, but it actually has some fairly dramatic effects.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a point, yeah.
I
About
don't-
whether it's been submitted on and
No.
it was in scope is another one.
Yeah,
but
no.
It's certainly a point.
So what is that outcome that you're wanting?
So there are many ways things get obstructed and so we don't allow trees because we don't want things dumped on there and everything. I get that.
Mm.
But then in a floodplain area where ponding area, we don't manage that. And it's a risk. And if it's not, I absolutely agree. I don't think it's been covered. I don't know that we've got scope to manage it in this area. But I've just raised it as an example of something that I know I've had discussions around different tables on. And yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? It's certainly something we've encountered, but whether it's within scope, we'll decide that. But if you wanted to comment on it as an issue, we can decide whether it's relevant or not, if you wanted.
Yes, so accumulation of bailage at critical outlets has been a problem in floods. We thought about this issue at the last time we did the bylaw, but we struggled with how you would write a rule and what are you really wanting, recognising it's an implicit part of farming activity. So we left it. We figured that it was better to deal with this issue through education and also possibly structural modification of outlets in a way that things could accumulate at the outlet, but not in a way that they restricted the flow so much that it would not drain. So we thought of other ways of dealing with it other than a regulatory way.
Okay. Cool. I know there's some sites I've seen that you put big posts in it.
Yes, correct.
Okay, cool.
Nobody wins from losing their bailage either, do they? So yeah,
No, it's,
yeah, but you're right, it's an issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, it sort of undermines E, 3.1E, yeah. So the other question above 3 in the box is resource consent or authorization. What sort of authorization are we talking about there? Is that under different bylaws?
Or it could be like an archaeological authority, authorization from DOC for handling of fish, or
Okay,
it's just to keep it quite broad so that people know that they have to look elsewhere as well.
okay. So you could put here's New Zealand on there as well, yeah. Okay,
In your note, you've referred to 3.1 and 3.2 as clauses.
Yeah.
As opposed to rules. I think it might be different than other places, but it's just a tidy up thing. I guess. Whichever one you want to use, I don't think matters.
okay. Any other questions on those?
I see you've raised a question about the flood protection vegetation. Was that resolved? Just about whether it should be the active channel or the bed?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know what an active channel was here.
That definition comes from ECAN because we're mirroring what they do
Yeah,
on the
because
other
of,
side of
yeah.
the river. So I don't think there's any, I don't know if there is how easy it is to define active channel to you.
So I presume the active channel was the bed.
Yeah, and I actually, that might be where it is. It's the theory is that the active channel can be quite a small part of the
Of the
whole
bed.
bed.
Ah,
And there's a lot of plantings there that still need to be protected, that might be in part of the bed, but not the active.
Okay.
bed.
It's a problem with braided rivers.
Yeah.
Waitaki.
Yeah. So that is. But
a lot of braided leaf creeks too. Yeah, okay, thanks. It's just, yeah, it's not. It's not fun. Okay. And any other questions? I didn't get any further in my, I don't think. The building and structures, defences against water and excavation sensitive areas. We've gone through a lot of those bits. No one had any other questions?
No, it will be answered, I think.
And floodways. And groins, crossbanks and training lines. I presume no one could put a groin in themselves either. That would have to be,
structure.
that would be a structure.
Depends where it is. Might be an RM thing as much as.
Okay. Okie dokie. That takes us down to 4. So yeah, did you come up with a decision about the clauses versus rules? I can't remember what your response to Hornbrook was.
Either's fine, I think.
Mhm.
What did we change? Did we change it to clauses or roles?
I think referenced, say 3.1 is a rule and then 3.1A is a clause,
Okay.
was the general direction.
Rule.
And so we go on to 5. The objections process, we're going to work that out. Now, how's the best way of doing that? We do it 5A, which is where we're going to add in the grounds or evidence or something. How do we do that? It's in response to that. It's sort of a further response. I don't think you want us writing this.
All you do there, I think, is you go and have a look at section, you'll be familiar, Josie, with 357 and the RMA, just because it talk about objecting writing, setting out your reasons for.
Okay.
Right.
And it's pretty straightforward. And B, you actually do over there talk about the matters presented in support of the objection. So
Okay.
I think you just bring it into that.
No, Josie has done some work making proposed changes to this, and I'm sorry I didn't email it to you earlier. I've just emailed it half an hour or so ago.
Oh,
So
okay.
that does have some proposed wording in it as well, but we can check that off against what you've suggested.
Okay, I'm not quite sure. Is that in a different email?
Yeah,
Oh, this is the proposed flood. Is this that's got now new amendments? Brilliant.
So that's the amendments that are referenced in the document.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that comes all the way through. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Compliance and enforcement. I haven't gone through this. If anyone else has any questions?
Just a little question. Actually, 61B1 sets out the respects in which I'm not quite sure if that's an appropriate word. Don't know how that put into there. Matters or something like that is probably better. That was all. Just strange. And then over the page, that's where I've noted like 6.2.8, 1 and 2, there use rule steady your clause, which is just an inconsistency, but same down 6.3.
So is 6.1B3, is that now going to be 20 days?
Yes.
20.
Yes.
Any other matters as go through that? I wasn't sure that appendix 1 helped me understand that, and I'm sorry, the pictures, and I think I'm just not reading it well. Now I've lost them completely.
Just the beds,
Yeah,
these diagrams.
but I'm not sure that I know how to fix them either, so I'm just wondering, did they make clear, absolute clarity to everyone else, and I'm just tired.
Yep,
You're happy?
that's not to say I'm right. I can understand them.
Yeah, okay. No, I don't think we've got a submission on it, so it's fine.
What's your problem though with them, Kate? So we can
Um,
understand what.
I think that 7 metres, I think we're showing a lot of things in there. Diagram referencing activities requiring bylaw authority.
I think these are the key.
Yeah, so I'd probably have top of the bank on both. Yeah. And then the 20 metres we don't put in, do we? Should we have the 20 metre rule in there? Is it right?
Oh, we could.
The 20 metre rule only relates to figure 3. Is that right?
No, it could relate to or 2 as well.
Good, okay. I thought, yeah, so of course.
The purpose of the diagram was to just to provide a bit of clarity as to where the top of the bank was, where a person would need to start measuring the distance from.
You might as well have the 20 that I should. I guess you might as well have the 20.
But it should be on both sides. It's of figure 1. And the question I asked earlier is what happens if the banks are different heights? Is it still both points? So if that was, as it often is, a drain will often have a spillover one side. And the reason that that's important is it doesn't matter that it's on that high level, it's still 7 metres. From that. Does that make sense? It's just that sort of thing. I was probably overthinking things. Forgive me. And it just basically says you can't put a tree, shrub or plant, anything within 7 metres. But the 20 metres wasn't explained, which would be an opportunity. Okay. Now to the, we've been going a long time, sorry. Are we happy to carry on just quickly with the submissions? Working our way through those, we'll try and do that more hastily, because I think you've
done it as we've
Yeah.
we have sort of done it.
formally tick it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think the, I haven't got that in the right. Can we do this in this order of the greens? The ones with the submission summary by topic, rather than by submission, maybe easier.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. We have decided that we didn't need to get legal clarification on what was the contour channel, because it's a slightly moot question. It would be, I think.
Interesting question. Though.
It's an interesting
It's a matter
question.
of fact, I guess.
Well, yeah, yeah. It would be good to resolve that issue at some stage. Yeah.
So we're happy with the staff response.
I think the confusion here possibly is because this is one of the schemes that isn't combined, whereas this wouldn't be a question in Clutha because they're combined there, aren't they? Flood and drainage. Yeah. And here it's the flood scheme uses some of the drainage scheme but doesn't but they deal with them differently. But I think we came to the conclusion, it's an interesting question, but put it aside that it was probably moot and didn't have a bearing on this case. Mr. Pritchard, we agree and accept the submission and the changes that the council note.
So we're just going to take, sorry, Kate,
Yeah.
just going to tick off the staff comment. We agree with that on the contour. Nothing else to.
Yeah.
We're going to do a response to that.
I think we understand that,
Yeah.
that we accept the staff response.
Yep.
And that there is an interesting question, but it's moot to the.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
I just should have asked this earlier, but when we initially talked about how we were going to do this whole process, how we're going to respond.
Accept, reject, or
Okay,
is that going to be the sort of in the RMA one way? Is it?
so we go through
Accept
the
and- yeah.
staff comments as the basis for the response.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I sorry. I suppose the first one is, do we accept the submission, reject the submission,
Right.
or in part?
okay.
Does that make sense? And then you hit, agree with the council.
The submission points, you mean?
Yeah. And then we get to agree with agree with the council, so the staff response or our own response.
Yep, and then what would be the style of replying back?
This is where you offered us another section that we haven't got, but so
Yeah, I
Okay.
haven't looked at that, but I'm assuming we could have just used that section,
Yeah.
Yeah,
turn that into decision.
Yeah.
In reason for.
So if we took Colin Skurs, we thank him for this submission, which is fine, but I suppose in here we reject his submission because it would be a moot point for the purposes of the bylaw. Yeah, that we didn't investigate it further because it wasn't going to assist.
sorry,
Or is it-
another
yeah.
question would be for this process, I know it's different, but once we do go into the formal deliberation, considering the staff's viewpoint, whether we have them present or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when have we finished asking questions
Yes.
and when haven't we, I guess?
Yeah.
That would
Is
be.
Does it matter?
Yeah, it
this
doesn't matter in
process?
this process.
In an
is
RMA
another thing.
situation, it'd be completely different.
Yeah, we can't go to the
Yeah,
environment, they can't go to the
Yeah,
environment court,
and
they
we
can't.
live to everyone
Yeah,
there anyway.
and it's
so-
Yeah.
otherwise a judicial review
Yeah.
is the only way that they could, I think, is that correct, judicial review? That we haven't taken things into account?
I think so. I'm pretty sure. I think so.
See, with Colin Skurs one, I think they raised potentially a valid issue around the nature of that water body, but that comes down to fact. And we don't have enough information on that. And it would raise issues with how this was notified, if this was incorporated into a bylaw. Because suddenly it would, all these other people be affected.
Yeah,
So I just don't think we can actually go there, although it could be something that could be looked back into the
that's
future.
a very good point. Yeah, exactly. It does. It wouldn't be natural justice because we haven't consulted on that particular point.
Yeah.
So we can't bring it in
We
at
could
this point.
recommend that the council get a legal advice on it, because I think for whichever way, I don't know that it's going to affect the actual effect of the process, but it does, is an interesting legal question that we should have more certainty about.
In the Carruthers case is actually on point on that.
Okay, so and so we're going to say natural justice precludes us taking the matter further at the moment, because we have to read, and we've got a time constraint here. So we're going to do a recommendation possibly to the council. We'll come back and confirm this later on to council to consider legal advice on that question. Are you happy with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
that
So
could be-
going to your other point, if this is only judicial review, are you happy, are we all happy to keep staff in here that we can? I think we need to make it clear now we're going to deliberations.
Yeah.
There are a number of things we're still seeking some advice from, just that we raised earlier. I think there's only one matter that we've got outstanding now.
It was just the.
Yeah, legal advice.
The use of
on-
that definition and the
Yeah,
purpose.
the rec rent.
Yeah, and the rec, sorry, too.
There was checking what council means in terms of a duly authorised by the council, etc. as well initially.
And the purpose and the rec. Okay,
Yeah,
they're not going to be substantive. You think?
no, no. So
They're
we
more
can
than- yeah,
continue with
yeah.
deliberations
Yeah.
today, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got time constraints as well.
Yeah.
Thus we want to.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yeah. So, okay, we've got Colin Skurs along that line, and that will be echoed for Mr.
Yeah.
Miller. Yeah, so we're accepting in part as by doing a recommendation to council. Yep. Okay.
So that's 7, I guess.
Yeah, so Pritchard, we've accepted Pritchard, I'm just going to write these. Oh, you tick that. Thank you for that. Submitted 7. I think that 7. There's time constraints, and we can't take this one further, but staff may decide to take that one just further.
Outside the bylaw review process. What they do with it.
Yeah. Thank you. Mr. Miller would be the same as the contour. Question for Mr. Skir. And then there's an operational question really for you. Is that, yeah, a lot of that's operational.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah. Almost an annual plan submission, yeah. I don't know, I think it goes beyond scope. Mr. Lighters, you've dealt with and accepted, accept?
Yep.
Yes, Mr. Bryant, we have modified the line. There's 2 parts to that. One is that it's modified the line and modified the definitions, which will have an impact on some of that stuff, but it will still potentially affect his place in part. Is that how we leave that?
Yep.
It'd be quite good if it's a garden could be kept out of it. Or not.
Well, yeah, it may rise that a whole lot of other people are going to go and see Mr.
Yeah.
See Mr. Shearer and Ms. Ellison, Weaver to resolve those issues of joining that now. Yeah. Tyree Plains Environmental Trials Group, we acknowledge their submission and accept it, but we note the advice that was given at the hearing from Dr. Palmer and suggest that's a different process. Yeah. And that will be the same for Lindsay Day
Yeah.
and the tunnels and Colin Brown from Tyree Trails Trust. It's good to see their enthusiasm.
And I think they'll get there one day.
Also, now, I'm just checking it, I'm on the right page now. Page
Page 20,
20, yeah, cool. Sorry, I was upside down here. Alan Cutler, so this is one that we can accept their submission. We note the trees are limited. This is, they want to,
Yeah.
so this actually, I just want to get clarity. So this is an actual property that is yours, the groin?
This is the Albert Town Buttress.
Yeah.
And it's actually on Crown land. So
Okay,
it's quite near the Albert Town
Let's
Bridge.
sign this off through an RMA process. Did you do that report, Tracy? Or it might have been Ralph Henderson.
Seems
Yeah.
one of those ones that's highly appropriate that they apply for whatever bylaw application to consider what they plan to do with planting and whether or not we think it's a good idea.
Well, this was an RMA one because it's dealing with the river.
Okay.
And it was more, probably more erosion control issues actually within the river bank and affecting property. So it's not really a bylaw issue. And given you're dealing with Dean's Bank, pretty significant to the amenity area.
Yeah. But yeah, would you expect this good man to go and just plant grasses along there?
I think
I want to get the messaging right.
almost all of the area is either Crown land or possibly QLDC going up the bank to where the houses are. So so he probably wouldn't be planting on any of those areas anyway. There were plantings put in when the buttress was completed as part of the consent.
So, and they'll be maintained as part of that consent.
Sorry, I don't know what the terms are, but I assume there's something like that in the consent.
Yeah, I just thought this was a gentleman who was just wanting the amenity values of the area, and he was happy to do plantings to ensure that those amenity values were there. And it's just, so we really, I wasn't quite sure that we really want to encourage people, good-minded people to go and do that sort of thing. I don't know.
We support it being made to look better. It's a very functional thing. But it's not our land.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't want people planting stuff in our rocks because it would dislodge it.
Indeed.
And so, you know, planting in proximity is fine, provided we just have a degree of control around what's planted and proximity and that kind of thing. The bylaw does enable that.
Okay.
Is this
Similar to
is
the
this in
university or
bylaw?
anyone else.
The buttress
Is the buttress in the bylaw?
projected it's a river defence. Okay, thank you. Craig Simpson Watershed Solutions Limitedness was similar to the one from Nicole Foot, Land Care Trust. I agree. I do think that both these submissions raise some really interesting questions about amenity, especially in some of those peri-urban areas. And but they can probably deal with that with a global consent, a global authority. It's the encouragement to work together to get the better environmental outcomes. And the question is the capacity of your guys to do that. And it's again outside of the bylaw to a certain extent. It's a nice thing. Are we happy to recommend to council that we look at, you know, capacity for that interaction? I don't know. There were pretty compelling photos of Nicole's. Or do we just leave it in this hearing?
Sorry, Kate, what are you proposing we suggest to council?
Well, I think Craig and Nicole both said that if you look at these photos,
yeah,
they could be doing so much more to tick off other strategic parts of our council role. And while at the moment they're filling this role, we're not using them to the best capacity. And while we can't deal with it in here, I think there's how do we activate to get to the maximum benefits that we could be providing?
So
all
the
those
question is, are there any ecosystem services essentially that our drains could be providing?
Yeah. That we could be in. Do we have to, is this a response that Land Care have to design all of those themselves and come back to us and negotiate, or is it that we, which is virtually what the submission says? Or is there anything else that council should be considering?
What would an ideal drain network look like into the future, I guess, is the question for the council. Yeah. And would you plan that on a large scale, or would you allow it case by case through exactly bylaw? Yeah,
what I'm going to say is, I think we accept we accept the submission or reject the ability to deal with it here. And accept that it's able to be done through the authority,
yeah,
but that we actually send that submission or the PowerPoint to the council and say this is just an opportunity you may want to consider, because we can't deal with it here. But does that make sense?
yeah. I think the question of drainage network into the future, considering it, and what is an ideal drainage network?
It was sort of an adaptation plan as well, because if you're going to have to need more of it, then you want to have that bigger purpose. It's a bit like what we've dealt with yesterday. Are you happy with that, Reed?
Yeah, well, related with that was the planting guidance issue. Tracy's recommended some additions to the website around that, so I think that's as far as we can go.
Yeah.
Really.
Ask the council how we would consider the wider issue, because it's probably beyond bylaw, definitely beyond bylaw, but some of that integrated catchment planning, the work we're doing, it would be considered. So
You have to remember the purpose of these things. And
Ice submission can't do much about it.
Yeah.
And actually quite a lot, same with the open fairly ecocentric to a certain extent as well. Okay. Nine. 14, so page 30, Emma Peters, we've dealt with most of these. It's agreed it's 20 days. Recommendation.
Was comfortable with all the staff recommendations.
So the staff comments have changed, slightly amended in response. So we accept submission and the amended staff recommendations. And I think on that case, they had pretty good ones on all the points that it made.
Yeah, I think so.
So that would carry through 15, 16, 17, 18, 19.
Which just brings it to the University of Otago.
Okay, University of Otago, we accept their submission and their issues with the definitions. We've got 3 minutes. Are you okay?
No,
Liz?
I'm just moving to the ejects.
Okay. How do you want to deal with this? The amended recommendations?
Yeah, well, I'm comfortable with what the staff have recommended in relation
The global.
to the university's number of issues that they've raised.
Okay.
I think that adds a degree of flexibility and practicality.
And he accepted he didn't want to be
Yeah.
outside of it as well, which was good. You're happy with
I
that?
think it's the only way to do it.
Yeah. And it actually, that's a response we can take back to those other groups. You know, that this is what we've done here. You could be considering it like that as well.
Yep.
Work program. Oliver Hornbrook, God bless him.
Oh, yeah.
Accept the advice. So there's, except for the number 7, we're going to get back to us on that.
Purpose one, yeah.
And we're still deciding about the wood council as well, aren't we?
I think agreed with all the staff recommendations.
Yeah, okay, thank you for, I'm sorry, I forgot, you'd already told us about the proposed, the national planning definition, sorry. It's in there and I should have remembered that, apologies. So we're going to accept, you're happy with all those recommendations, staff recommendations?
Subject to the amendment.
Yeah, there's just those other points which will have some bearing on that. Yeah, Eleanor Linspot, the pet farmers.
They raised the the driveway issue, but I think driveways are quite significant.
Potentially,
Yeah. Within what we're dealing with here, so I agree with the staff in that one.
Mhm.
I think everything else we've kind of touched on.
Yeah, we've done some amendments accordingly. Thank you. Loudbrow's the one on.
Just making sure we're all the changes are reflected in all the different submissions. Yeah, so subject to the changes already made, I'm happy with that.
Yeah. And I've talked about some things. We might just double check those staff comments that come through the appendices.
Still it's an annual plan submission, really.
It's an annual plan submission, it didn't appear, and no further action. I'm supportive of that.
Yeah.
Bit of 3, and that's accept, and accept. And then there's 2 other matters which are the staff have proposed, and we accept those.
Yeah,
We have to formally accept those.
I've read them and I think they make sense. So
Yes.
if you can do it, you should do it.
Yeah, and you're saying that they're minor basis. Thank you. You happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay, process-wise now, we'll just get some confirmation on those last 3 matters. I'm presuming that you want us to write the decision up, or do you wish to write it up? I think to do that first.
I thought we might get the assistants to write it up because they already know the way around the document really quick.
If you're happy to do that, that's great. You've sort of understand it. Maybe some tweaks just so that reasoning or those 2 or 3 recommendations we make to council.
We can get it to you so you can make
Yeah.
those tweaks.
So everything else, I think we can decide by email, hopefully. Any other matters that anyone wants to raise before we close this part of the hearing, the deliberations?
Just to thank the staff for doing a good job on the reviews and coming back to us with some sensible recommendations.
Yeah, I think it's been a really good process. It's been good, really good stuff to think about. We're lucky to have an engaged community that assists us with their submissions. Thank you very much. I now call this deliberation session ended. Thank you. Adjourned, sorry.
Because we still need to get
Those 3. Thank you. Adjourned. Apologies. Thank you. Until next time, yet to be decided. Yay. I was hoping this is my weekend starting, but